Hello, my name is Abigail. Welcome to or back to Polyglot Progress, and welcome to my annual year-end recap video. This is a video where I usually talk about the goals that I set at the end of the year prior, and also just what did and didn't go well in my language learning this year, some of the things that I learned. But just gonna dive right into it now and say that this was not a great year for me. And with that, I didn't end up doing much language learning at all. So overall, if you're someone who's really just here for language stuff and you don't really care so much about me personally, that's totally fine, but this video is probably not for you. I'm gonna be making a separate video on some of the things that I feel like I learned this year about myself as a language learner and about language learning in general. So if you're looking for less emotional language content that has like a specific takeaway at the end of the reflection, keep an eye out for that. And with that out of the way, yeah, this year sucked. It's no secret that I was having a bit of a hard time at the end of 2022. In my 2022 recap video and in my other videos from that time, I talked a lot about how burnt out I was, and I definitely mentioned not getting to do a lot of language stuff over the course of the year and feeling disappointed in that. But if last year I was surviving but not thriving, this year I wasn't even surviving. I was just struggling. Last year I said that it felt like life was kind of passing me by. Like it sort of felt like I was this like rock in a river and life was the water and it was just flowing past me and I wasn't really experiencing stuff. I wasn't doing the things that I wanted to be doing. Time was passing in this weird, slow, quick way, and I felt like I kind of couldn't keep up, at least not in the ways that I wanted to. I wasn't thriving, as I said. But this year, I was experiencing it. The river water was taking me. Unfortunately, it was an intense current, and I was drowning in it. And you can really see this based on my uploads, or really lack thereof, over the course of 2023. There are obviously times when I'm busy in my life and can't really post so often, sure. But during those times, I'm usually still working on things, because I'm still excited about the idea of posting videos and working on videos and really find ways that I can chip away at projects, even if it's editing for like 5 minutes a day or whatever. But with times like this year and last year where I'm really not uploading for months on end, and when in both years, I believe, I was only able to actually post my monthly vlogs for January, it really is obvious to me that the reason is that I was feeling burnt out and depressed, and I just wasn't in the mental state to be working on videos. I didn't have the desire that I normally have to be making content. And then there were also times this year when I kind of actively chose to not be making videos. There were periods of time this year where I was really actively grieving, and I just quite frankly did not want to vlog myself during that time, especially when I knew the video would just be me being sad and my language updates would exclusively be, yeah, I haven't really done much. And much like my mental state held me back with making videos this year, it definitely hindered my ability to be disciplined with my language learning and even to really have a desire to do much when it came to language learning. And because of that, I definitely did not hit most of my goals. And I feel like I have really gone back and forth on how I feel about that. I feel like a big part of me recognizes that that is okay, that I had a really rough year, and it makes sense that I didn't really want to focus more energy and attention on language projects. But at the same time, there are still parts of me that feel bad about not hitting my goals. And I think even more so that feel bad about not putting the effort in to even work towards hitting some of those goals. And I think all of that becomes even more complex when you add YouTube into the equation, because as much as I really like being open and honest about my language progress or sometimes lack thereof on this channel, and as much as I personally as a YouTube viewer want to hear people's honest experiences with their goals, even if that means they did not hit all of them, it feels really vulnerable and almost a little embarrassing to come on here for a second year in a row and say that I didn't meet most of my language goals, especially when the things that I set out to do at the start of this year were things that were really, really attainable and goals that I had set a bit lower than I might normally because I knew I was coming out of a bad period in 2022 and I didn't hit a lot of my goals and I wanted it to be really achievable to reach my goals this year. But like, it is what it is. It was a bad year. I can't put it any other way. And unfortunately, my language learning got caught up in that and is in itself part of me having had a bad year. And that sucks, but it's okay. Languages will still be here in 2024, and though a lot of what happened this year was outside of my control or just unrelated to language learning, I still learned quite a bit about myself as a language learner and about how I approach language learning and how I can better approach it in the future so that I don't have as many years like this one. With this year having been as bad as it was, I'm really trying to view it as almost like a controlled burn that they do for forests, where like things had had to die and end and fall apart and burn in order for my life to be a luscious forest in a few years where I'll feel grateful that maybe some of these things went wrong or ended or whatever, so that I can have the life that I am living then. And I'm hoping that that kind of starts next year. I'm really hoping that the burning part of this metaphor is done. And also, to its credit, 2023 was not all bad. Despite not hitting many of my language goals, I did hit some of them. And also, even outside of my goals, I did do some language learning. Plus, I accomplished a few really big language adjacent type things that I'm really proud of. Number one, I finally launched my website. Polyglotprogress.com has been a dream for me for like 6 years now. I taught myself the whole process, and I am so proud of myself for being able to figure out how to do that. There are definitely much fancier looking websites out there, but I wanted something fairly simple, and I can always learn new things and make it a little more complicated in the future if I want to. But for now, I made that and I built it, and that's so cool. Number two, I posted some of my favorite videos ever, even though I did not upload as much as I would have liked to this year, and really feel like there were chunks of time where I wasn't really working on any videos. I'm really proud of the content that I did post, and I had a lot of fun making it, so I'm feeling really, really good about 2024 and making things that I'm even more excited about. Number three, I left my full-time job in May and took a leap into the unknown to try freelancing full-time. This has definitely been a thing that has also at times added some stress into my life, and was definitely this scary, uncertain thing when I was planning to do it and when I finally did it. But overall, I'm really proud of myself for doing that scary thing. I think that it has worked out to be a pretty good decision, and I think this will definitely be one of those things that really comes through in future years, one of those things where I look back and I'm like, yes, I needed to make that decision in 2023 for me to be in the places that I am now. I definitely have some plans for 2024 in terms of my career, and I'm prioritizing some pretty big moves there. So that is scary and exciting, but we'll talk about that, I guess, in the monthly vlogs and at the end of next year. And number four, I feel like I really did a lot to recover from the burnout that I was experiencing at the end of 2022 and the start of 2023. Plus, as an added bonus, I feel like I'm now just better equipped to deal with burnout. I feel like I'm less likely to get burnt out in the future. I feel like I will be able to catch it earlier if I do. And then I feel like I now know a little bit more about how to recover from it as well. But talking about actual language stuff finally, I do want to start off with just some general stats because I did have a few goals that were hour-based or based on reading a number of books, etc. I actually stopped logging my time on Polylogger about halfway through the year, so I actually don't have an accurate number to give you as to how many hours I spent learning languages or doing things with my target languages this year. According to what I do have on Polylogger, I've done 173 hours and 40 minutes of language learning this year. And just based on the contact I had with languages after I stopped logging, I would guess that an accurate number is probably somewhere around 250 to 270 hours. That is also totally a guess, so I don't actually know. However, regardless of what the number actually is, my goal for the year was to hit 700 to 1,000 hours, and I can tell you that it definitely was nowhere near that. And this check-in is very, very important to remember going into the rest of the video, because I think the fact that I spent so little time learning languages this year really contributes to why I did not hit a lot of my goals. I did a little bit of math, and even if it was 270 hours that I hit, so the upper end of my guess, that's only 3% of the year, so I definitely was not spending much time learning or using or maintaining any of my languages this year, and I think that it shows. In terms of books this year, I wanted to read 50 books and have a good number of that be in other languages, and I do think I'll probably read a few more books before the year ends, but at the time of filming this, I have finished 23 books, so this was clearly not the year for that. I also read most of my books in English this year, so I don't really feel like I hit my goal of reading a lot in my target languages either. And then I also wanted to watch 50 movies this year and have a lot of those be in my target languages. If I barely read in my target languages this year, I really barely watched any movies in my target languages this year. And I also did not meet that goal. I got about halfway as well, but I did a little bit better. At the time of recording, I have watched 28 movies. And again, I do feel like I probably will watch some before the year ends as well. Both of these are goals that I'm carrying over and modifying a teeny tiny bit next year. So this may have not been the year, but hopefully next year is. Moving out of stats, I am not going to go through specific goals, but I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about each of my languages, reflecting on my year with them, and talking a little bit about what the future looks like for each of them. So starting with French, this is definitely the language that I had the most contact with this year, partly because I was able to be the most consistent with it. I have a friend who I call weekly, and we watch a show together and we chat a little bit in French, and we stayed pretty consistent with that for the whole year. We definitely had a few scheduling conflicts, but it did mean that I stayed consistent with having contact with French in a way that I didn't necessarily with other languages, especially when I was having harder periods periods of my life. One kind of strange thing that happened is that this year was the first year that I moved away from a quarterly goals system and moved to just year goals and then monthly goals. But weirdly enough, how I used French this year can really be best described in quarters. I was really focused on preparing for the DELF in the first quarter of the year and the third quarter of the year. And then I was not really doing much of anything in French during the second and fourth quarter of the year. And this was not intentional at all. Like I said, I moved away from quarterly things. I also had definitely been intending to just stay consistent with preparing for the DELF the whole year because I really fully intended to take the DELF this year, but it was sort of just how life shook out. And let me tell you, it was not a great system for me to have fallen into. Like, I feel like third quarter was really just me trying to play catch up and get myself back to where I was first quarter. And while I do think that I made some good progress, I cleaned up some mistakes that I've been making in French for a long time during those periods of time where I was more actively preparing for the DELF. I also feel like I got into a really bad place mentally with my French this year. During the times where I was really actively studying for the DELF, I feel like I was putting so much pressure on myself to be making a lot of progress. And I feel like I just became hypercritical of everything that I did in French, which I do think is natural if you're preparing for an exam or maybe an interview or just something where you're going to be judged on your level in a language. But I really feel like it was detrimental to my level. I feel like I stopped speaking as fluidly and fluently because I started thinking through like, wait, let's remember this grammar rule so I don't make this mistake I always make. Or like, let me make sure that I use this synonym that I learned that's a little more sophisticated and will sound better when I take the DELF instead of this word that I naturally use all the time. And then during those periods of time where I wasn't focusing so much on French, I felt guilty that I wasn't focusing on French. And it also made me feel guilty about using other languages because it wasn't French. It wasn't preparing for this exam that I want to take. I definitely learned a lot from all of that, and I definitely did a lot more reflecting on why I want to take the DELF. And I don't feel like my personal goal of wanting to get the DELF just for my own self is really as big of a goal right now anymore. So it's definitely not a goal that I've let go of forever. I still someday would like to take the DELF and I would like to get that certificate. But as you'll hear in my goals video, next year is really going to be about getting myself back to language learning and getting back my love for language learning and preparing for a standardized test when I have seen that I put so much pressure on myself when I'm doing that to a degree that it really hinders my progress with preparing and then also hinders my other languages and just makes me not happy. It doesn't fall into that. So who knows? Maybe halfway through 2024 I'll say that I'm doing it in 2025 or whatever. But for now, it is not a goal. I just want to be using French and improving French, and sure, preparing for the DELF in that way, in a way that feels good. Some good things did come out of preparing for the test this year, though. I feel like I made a lot of improvements in little grammar errors that I've been making for years. I also took lessons with a ton of different tutors and also tried out some new ways of taking French classes, which was pretty cool. And I think also in the times where I wasn't being hypercritical of myself, improved my confidence quite a bit and became more comfortable with my level in French. One of the benefits of taking DELF-based lessons and working with a lot of tutors to really pick out my errors in French is that I got to be reassured that I am being overly critical of my level most of the time. Have I really absorbed that and gotten it into my head yet? I don't think so, but I do think that I made a little bit of progress there. I don't have a lot to say about German other than I miss it. I did do a 40-hour 7 days language challenge in German this summer and I really enjoyed it, but I do feel like I lost touch with a lot of my goals that I had for German this year. Like, I didn't really take the Lingoda classes I wanted to. I didn't make as much progress in my textbook as I wanted to. I didn't read as much as I wanted to, and I really barely spoke the language. The good thing is that all of that has got me really itching to do more in German next year, and I think that's really great because if you've been around for a while, you probably remember that there was a span of maybe a year or two where I just wasn't sure why I was still learning German. I didn't really know if I should continue with it, and that is definitely gone now. I really cannot imagine not having German in my life. So I'm really excited to get back to it next year, really get my speaking back on track, get back into reading and watching things in it, and finally finish up some resources that I've been using for a long time. Spanish is another language that didn't get a lot of attention this year. In fact, I think Spanish was probably the language that I neglected the most. But the lack of attention thing is definitely a theme that you will see throughout the rest of this video. Even though I didn't do a ton in French and there were periods of time I wasn't doing anything, I definitely think that that is a language that got way more of my attention than any other language. It took up most of my language time this year. And since that was quite limited to begin with, it does mean that my other languages really did not get to have a lot of time with me this year. In terms of where I'm ending the year with Spanish, I definitely still feel quite comfortable comprehension-wise, but I definitely don't feel quite quite comfortable in terms of speaking the language, and I've actually had a couple things that have happened throughout this year that have really proved how rusty my Spanish speaking has gotten, but have also been scenarios that have really made me want to have my Spanish speaking abilities back. They've been situations where I'm like, I wish I could participate in this conversation the way that I want to. I wish I had the Spanish level that I used to, or ideally an even better one. So you bet that 2024 is going to be a bit of dusting off the cobwebs in the Spanish part of my brain and getting back to that. While I do think I did a little bit more in Italian than Spanish this year, I once again don't feel like I did that much. And while I know this year has been a weird one, for those of you who've been following for a little while, you probably know that this is like year 3 of me not having done much in Italian over the course of a year. And this has really put me in a space of contemplation with Italian. When I first found myself not doing a lot in Italian, I was really, really adamant that this did not mean that I was putting the language down, and that it wouldn't mean that. I would find a way to kind of come back to it and get it involved in my life again. I didn't want Italian to be like Esperanto, which is a language that I studied previously and then ultimately decided to put down because I just felt like I didn't really have a place for it in my life and didn't really have a desire to continue learning it or even maintaining it, and knew that putting it down would mean that I would have more energy for languages that did have a place in my life. But now that this is the 3rd year of me feeling like I've neglected the language, I'm starting to wonder if this is my life naturally showing me that Italian doesn't really have a spot in my life anymore, and if it would benefit me to stop putting energy towards trying to maintain it and trying to get it back into my life so that that energy can be put towards my other languages that I'm learning and have more of a spot in my life, or even towards new languages that have a little bit more of a purpose when it comes to my life and will serve me a little bit better in the things that I enjoy doing right now and the things that I hope to do in the future. The thing is though, a big reason that I started learning Italian was because I really, really love Italian cinema, and I feel like it's been a few years since I've really consistently been watching movies in Italian. So I'm wondering if it's just that I haven't really been in contact with the thing that gives Italian purpose in my life, and if just doing that again would give it purpose again and would make it be something that I should continue with. But then at the same time, you can argue like, well, you haven't been watching those things, so maybe that's not so much of a thing in your life anymore, blah, blah, blah. Basically, I'm having both thoughts, and I really am not really seriously considering putting Italian down yet. I definitely want to do some other things in it first and give it a fair shot. Like I said, German was in kind of a similar place to this at one point, and now I really can't imagine not having it in my life. So I don't want to just put down Italian without having given it that same chance that German had, because Italian might just be the exact same way that my German was. So I just want to give it a fair shot. It just is that this year, for the first time, I am actually considering maybe putting this project down. And I do want to clarify, if I do end up putting Italian down, that doesn't mean I'm never gonna touch the language again. I'm never gonna listen to Italian in my life. I'll still probably watch movies in Italian, and I know from time to time I'll even watch videos in Esperanto, and I'm always really excited by how much I still understand, and I'm sure I'll continue doing the same thing in Italian if I decide to put it down. Putting it down for me just means that I will not be putting an effort in to maintain the language or continue to improve it, and as a result, it might give me a little more time and energy to put towards languages that do have just a more natural fit into my life. But again, let me stress, this is not an official announcement yet. I do not know what's happening. This will be one of those things that you'll get to hear about throughout next year. Moving on to Bulgarian, which unsurprisingly to me at least was the language that I was second most consistent in this year. I was super consistent in Bulgarian leading up to the summer, I would say. And then I feel like it kind of fell off from there, and it really has been a long time since I have taken a lesson. So I feel like when I come back, I'm gonna have to kind of catch up a little bit and refresh some of the things that I'd been learning this year, but I also don't think that'll take too long, and I am planning to go back to taking lessons. And the amazing thing is, even though I wasn't really consistent in the second half of the year, I think Bulgarian is actually the language that I made the most progress in this year. I had this big goal of having my lessons 100% in Bulgarian by the end of this year, and in like February, I made that happen. So early on into the year, we switched from doing these structured lessons to just having conversations in Bulgarian, and I was able to do that and have conversations in Bulgarian for 30 minutes to an hour, with of course the help of having words given to me at times because I still have a pretty limited vocabulary in Bulgarian. But this is definitely one of my shining moments in the language, and shining moments for the year language-wise. I'm so proud of that and so excited about what that means for my Bulgarian going forward. It feels like this huge breakthrough that I was really struggling to hit for such a long time, and I am just so excited that it happened. I'm super excited for what that means for my Bulgarian next year and can't wait to see what progress I make then. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, unlike with Italian, I have already made the decision to put down ASL indefinitely. And the real unfortunate part of this is that while sure, I did have to make the ultimate decision, it is for a reason that really is not my decision. I mentioned in a few of my goals videos that I was having trouble keeping up with practicing ASL because I found that signing really exacerbated a nerve issue I have in my hand and wrist and arm. And on my 2023 goals videos, a lot of you left me tips for signing properly so I can make sure that I avoid discomfort. But unfortunately, even though it is an issue that gets worse when I sign, it is not an issue that is caused by my signing posture. So ultimately, the solution is not going to be in signing differently. It's going to be through medical treatment and making this a little bit less of a problem for me. So I'm really bummed about this. Like I said, even though this was my decision, it wasn't a decision that I wanted to make. I would like to continue to learn ASL and maintain my ASL. It's not a situation like with Italian where I'm like, I don't know how it fits in my life anymore. The desire and the purpose and everything else is really there in my life. It's just that until my nerves are a little bit happier, I have to take a break with it. And I hope that that's all this is. I hope that it's a break. My hope is really that even if it's not something that I can do next year, maybe on my goals for 2025, ASL can be back. But for now, I am putting it down indefinitely. And yeah, that's pretty much all I've got for you. I'm really hoping 2024 will be a better one for me, and I'm really, really excited to work to make language learning and making videos a bigger part of my life again next year. I would love to hear how your language learning year went. I'm hoping that it was a little bit better than mine. I'll see you in the next one, and remember, practice makes progress.